Okay, so this is a bit of a weird one. If you're a longtime viewer of my channel, then you're probably a little surprised to see Fire Emblem content on my channel. But I have been a Fire Emblem fan for a pretty decent chunk of time. And this is a matchup I'm sure there's debating on within the Fire Emblem fandom, as well as even people who haven't really played that much of Fire Emblem itself. And that is Byleth, or the Three Houses version of Byleth to be specific. I will not be using the Three Hopes version. The main reasoning for that is if you take stuff for Byleth for 2 games, and then you take stuff for Shez from only 1 game, since he's only been in 2, and the other one Byleth's also in, it would just kind of make this fight completely unfair. However, I am still going to reference stuff that happens within Three Hopes for Byleth. Some of the feats and stuff, I'm just not going to give Byleth access to all the new abilities and stuff that Shez has access to. Also, Three Houses Byleth is stronger than the Three Hopes version, so I'm just using the stronger variant. Now, before I get into scaling, one thing that is kind of weird about Fire Emblem scaling is magic. Some spells function differently than how you'd assume it first, and some scaling can be highly inconsistent because of this. Mainly the Luna spell with the black hole creation. There's several different statements I found that some say it's not a real black hole, others say it pretty much counts as one. But either way, I am considering the Luna spell equivalent to a black hole of the size of the spell for the scaling. But that is going to be the highest end scaling for both characters, as Shez has one feat that is heavily reliant on the Luna spell being considered a black hole. And even without it being considered a black hole, the feat's still pretty impressive regardless. Now I guess off to the scaling. Starting out with some pretty basic scaling for Byleth. Even early on, Byleth's able to react to light speed attacks. We even see it with the cutscenes. So, light speed, movement speed for Byleth is pretty casual. FTL seems more consistent with later showings. We also know Byleth can dodge lightning, as well as supercharged arrows with legendary weapons, which should all be around light speed as well. This is consistent as we actually see other characters in earlier games that are likely weaker than the more modern Fire Emblem era dodge light, so it makes sense. Now, when it comes to actual physical strength, Byleth does actually upscale most non-crest bearers, including some of the more physically powerful ones, as Byleth should realistically scale and scale above Dimitri. And Dimitri scales above someone like Dedue would scale to someone like Raphael and Casper, so this is important because Raphael and Casper both are able to essentially knock up massive amounts of stone with their attacks. These stones are around the size of small buildings, and Dedue even has some that are around the size of large buildings. Force required to do this is pretty substantial, obviously. And Dimitri's even more impressive than that, as he's directly stated to be way stronger. There's also some statements for Dimitri claiming that he can lift a horse with one hand and can move around giant boulders pretty easily, which do seem to be consistent with the showings he has in game. Edelgard's also another character that scales around Dimitri's level, and Byleth is consistently shown to be on or above her level as well. Even her transformations level, which is important because her transformations should almost scale directly to Rhea in her Immaculate One form. The thing that's important about the Immaculate One is we straight up see her nuke massive amounts of people with her attacks. Some of these explosions getting well over town level to small city. There's also implications that she's stronger than base Byleth, who has statements that imply he's at least mountain to mountain range level with the Sword of the Crater once he's awakened. She's also stronger than Nemesis pre-resurrected. Pre-resurrected Nemesis is actually confirmed at least mountain level. So all that to account for physical strength, Byleth's well above mountain level, all the way up to potentially country level. This is actually even more consistent with the magic nuke feat, the Javelins of Light, or magic nukes as some people have started calling them. We see Rhea survive 3 of them. This is important because most calculations for them get these blasts to around country level, or at the very least, very high in the mountain, and some people have even gotten them to near low continental. This is also sort of where Byleth scaling gets a little wild, as there are heavy implications that he scales directly to Sothis. I am using the male versions of both Byleth and Shez in this, if anyone was wondering. It should have been pretty obvious by the thumbnail. But there's heavy implications that Byleth scales directly to Sothis. Sothis was able to teleport the Javelins of Light, which most likely means she was overpowering them to do this. You could say she was just teleporting them. They're just going off power. It's not unreasonable to assume she could have just overpowered them altogether. And they were able to blast the basically a massive mark across Fodlan, the continent that the game takes place on. The calcs for this get to almost continental, so that's where Byleth's power seems to cap usually. However, you can get it much higher with the Luna spells that he can overpower. The standard Luna spell can get to almost moon level, if you consider a natural black hole, which is kind of inconsistent with in-game showings, but you can get it that high. The more consistent stuff for Luna is more like country to continental, meaning that Byleth should be very comfortably in that level of power. Other notable stuff that could actually upscale his scaling a lot is that he's capable of straight up cutting out of a dimension, so he can cut through dimensional barriers. And there's also a direct statement that basically says that with the Sword of Crater he can overpower the realm of, I think it's Sakaros. I'll have to look it up after this. But it is a confirmed infinite realm of darkness. If you take this at face value, that means he does have potentially infinite power, which, given Fire Emblem having pretty consistently having kind of odd shifts in power between cutscenes and gameplay, it's not completely outlandish to assume that's actually a real thing. And also Sothis' many statements that claim she's like universal and shit, so you could honestly make the argument that Byleth's a universe buster at the highest level. I would personally not take it that high, but I'd say the most consistent level you can get Byleth's around continental with the higher stuff. And if you want to like go to like insane lengths, you can get it all the way up to like Galaxy Universal if you want to go crazy. But personally, I wouldn't really take it above continental usually. Maybe Moon with the highest eyeball I could really give. Abilities, Byleth's a pretty decent magic fighter. He mainly seems to use light, fire, and lightning based spells, which, I mean, those are usually the most damaging without dark magic. Although he is capable of using dark and black magics as well. Black magics is a lot of stuff in Fire Emblem, but he's capable of using the other forms of black magic as well as dark magic. But fire, light, and lightning seem to be the main ones. Some of these spells have town level stuff in earlier games and get way higher with his scaling. So he's pretty powerful with that. He's also capable of basically using spells without actually using them in like counters and stuff, which up his scaling significantly, as he's able to actually use them quicker and more efficiently than even some of the mages in game. And there's also implications he should scale somewhat this Saros or Rhea's magic powers, which in game even have like town level and city level stuff. So he's pretty decent with magic too. Capable of using different elements on his weapons and using really crazy elemental techniques with his weapons, such as creating fire whirlwinds as well as just standard whirlwinds, lightning attacks, and all sorts of stuff like that. And then his best ability is the Divine Pulse. It essentially stops time and allows him to rewind it. However, there is showings in Three Hopes that allow it to pause time, kind of like Dio's Time Stop and JoJo's Bizarre Adventure, something like that. Now, I know I said I wasn't going to give Byleth Three Hopes stuff, but that does seem to be consistent with Three Houses, as it does actually pause time in that game as well. Just due to how the game works, it doesn't let you attack during it, as that would make you too overpowered in it. But I do think that is consistent with the Divine Pulse in Three Houses, so I'll be allowing it to both pause and rewind time. Granted, this pause rewind does have a limit to it in 3 houses. It does not in 3 hopes though. It also works after he's taken fatal damage, essentially giving him multiple lives. On to Shez. Right off the bat, even before he was powered up, he was able to at least somewhat hold his own against Byleth to a pretty poor, but at least, I mean, he was hanging in there, I guess. This Byleth was likely stronger at the start of 3 hopes than you would have been at the start of 3 houses, just due to using a silver sword, something you don't get until later on in 3 houses. And also the fact that Shez pretty casually does better than Byleth did at the start of 3 houses within the first mission. Now, when you look at speed, Shez actually is very consistently faster in light, regularly dodging light speed attacks in game, and even being able to almost perception blitz characters that are light speed at least. He's also able to run and catch an arrow, well, block an arrow midair after, I think it's Shamir fired it. This is very impressive, as she actually has showings of light speed perception and stuff as well, and almost speed blitzing people with that. So I think it's pretty clear that Shez should be the faster of the two in both combat and movement speed. This is consistent with in-game showings as well. When it comes to physical strength, it is pretty obvious that non-awakened Shez is weaker than Byleth, at least physically. Even in 3 hopes, when Byleth was weaker than he would be in 3 houses. However, when awakened, it seems like they're at least even. Or you could really argue Shez is a lot physically stronger, as he's able to shatter Byleth's blade. You could argue this is just because the blade is more durable, the one that Shez is using in the sword clash, but I'd argue it's probably more of a strength difference. Now, would that make him stronger than an awakened Byleth with the Sword of the Creator? No. Would it make him at least relative? Yes. It probably should. Meaning that he should scale to pretty much everything Byleth has, and potentially even upscale some of it. Unlike Byleth, he actually has in-game showings of cutscenes where he's overpowering characters that are around Dimitri and Edelgard's level. He was able to overpower a mind-controlled Edelgard. Granted, it was a non-awakened Edelgard, but he was still able to physically overpower and even break her Hero's Relic, which is something that we've never even seen characters like Byleth pull off before. He's also capable of defeating almost everyone within the same roster of 3 houses and 3 hopes. So they're both able to do stuff like that. He's also capable of defeating just the same types of monsters that Byleth can do. So pretty much everything Byleth can do, Shez can do just as well. Where things tend to switch is their abilities. Shez focuses a lot more on the dark magic side of things, and his spells are likely a tiny bit more damaging than most of Byleth's. Granted, Byleth does seem to be more skilled with magic. Shez's magic just seems to get way stronger as he gets stronger. His double sword style, you would think would make him worse at magic, actually seems to make him better at using it with his weapons. And just like Byleth, he has a showing of cutting through a dimension. Only he didn't need the Sword of the Creator to do it, he just needed his own awakening sword, dark magic sword, whatever you want to call it. He was also able to overpower Arval. Arval is weird to scale, but you could honestly get Arval to Universal with the same argument I made for Byleth earlier. I would never really do that, but at the bare minimum, due to Arval creating several massive islands style structures, you can get Arval to at least like city level-ish. And the Luna spell Arval uses, which is the feat I was talking about earlier, that requires you to think of the Luna spell as an actual black hole. Given Shez this scaling, you can get him to like planetary and potentially higher with just that feat alone. You could honestly make the argument this is like Dwarf Star, but I would never really put it that high up. So for the more consistent stuff, Shez does seem to be more powerful but Byleth seems to be just more overall skilled as a fighter. Now, there's also the narrative strength within these characters, and it does seem that at least the games seem to imply Shez is weaker than Three Houses Byleth and even Three Hopes Byleth to some degree. I personally don't agree with that, but I would just like to mention that the games heavily imply Byleth is the superior of the two. Now, as for who I think actually wins the fight, I think it's extremely close, but I would honestly say Byleth probably does pull off the win. The reasoning for this is mainly because Three Hopes Byleth just seems to be several tiers above his Three Hopes self, and Shez did actively struggle with the Three Hopes version of Byleth quite a bit. Now, does that mean Byleth just speed blitzes and one-shots? No. As they would both be able to put up one hell of a fight. You could even argue Shez would win if Byleth didn't have the time powers. Now, Shez can also get these powers, but giving Shez that would mean you have to give him every single character from Three Hopes Unique's ability, and that would just make him so utterly broken with hacks that it wouldn't even be a fight. Of course, you could still, I guess, make the argument Byleth's would be better, but it probably wouldn't be, honestly. So yeah, that's how I see this fight going. You could debate me in the comments if you think Shez pulls it off, but I'm pretty sure most people think Byleth wins anyway. And I guess I'll see you guys in the next one. Bye.